Today we are at Tingiria village setting up an exhibition that is an output of research that we started at the Manchester Museum.
Njitagwo Ria wa Ngeci kana Ria wa Thingira uria andu aingi manjui. Ndi founder umwe wa Thingira Cultural Village. Guku ni Thingira wa githomo. Tuthomithagia uhoro wa unduire witu, mitugo, miikarire, indo citu, maundu mothe maria makoni cultural heritage. Niguo twikaga guku thiini wa cultural village ino.
We are here as part of a project that is looking at community voices and conversations, especially when it comes to restitution and conversations around reparations around African objects.
So we're hoping now that we're in Tingiria, which is more like a village or rural community, we'll get more from the people who are most likely to be making and using similar objects that you see on the pictures there. So it's a question of allowing these communities here today to see for themselves, maybe for the first time, what Manchester Museum hold. Then from that engagement, we'll have an open dialogue. I was just picking a few words from what you're saying in terms of the whole idea of the witch doctor and the Sangoma and that. So some of the objects that you are going to see here, they literally were confiscated or stolen from our medicine men. And that knowledge was lost in translation because these white people believe that if we keep these people with these kind of fetish objects, they are going to fight against us from a spiritual realm, like they will resist colonial rule. So one of the ways in which they were justifying the stealing of these objects was to disempower us from our spiritual powers, which are located within these objects. And we're called witch doctors, witchcraft. It's not witchcraft, it's a practice. It's just like modern day medicine.
Getumbe.
Getumbe kile kiario mume.
Na si ndio nasema ilikuwa inaandikwa ilikuwa inawekwa meratina ndani. Na si ndio nasema hata Wakamba walikuwa naye.
No.
Walikuwa na kama hii.
Exhibition ino acokie kuri ene nigetha amenye ni bata wacio. Indo icio ni part of us. Cina connection spiritually. Indo icio nicio ciakuite uritu wa unduire witu.
Nimesikia a lot of different commentary on how this is used in a
story behind.
This is dome.
No, so najua ni dome but inavaliwa aje?
Tukite kuthoma.
Lakini sasa inavaliwa na
maundu magitene, maundu ma tene.
Hii ni kama manto.
Naona? Toria riu toria mbere menya ubu kundigara kana kiroiko kwi nyamu cingi twanyana cio ciera cietagwa giko.
I'm trying to say this one. This is one of our very historic.
Nandi ugekira mbakia eguru
and it is
bacoka ugekira mayamba tatu maira munya
na hakuna hata ukitafuta
bagekira
it's here and
kamakala bakucia nande
hakuna in Kenya.
Ora batuketra no kuonia kio
Hivyo. Lakini imebeba mambo mingi sana.
Maneno ni veti.
So ini one of the older ones.
Hii ni kisu.
No ndiko inatolewa hivi. Vijana, young boys.
Hiyo ni kisu. Hiyo ni suindata.
Ni vijana wadogo sasa wa.
We only have pictures of the objects.
Ici ni indo citu cia iru igitwarwo Ruraya.
But hopefully we have them.
Nake ora wina cio nionete ni wega kugerera anake aitu matureheire exhibition ino acokie kuri ene nigetha amenye ni bata wacio. Indo icio ni part of us. Cina connection spiritually. Indo icio nicio ciakuite uritu wa unduire witu.
nimesikia a lot of different commentary on how this is used in a no, so najua ni dome but inavaliwa aje?
Akina Spain, name it.
Sasa inavaliwa na
Zile nchi
vijana.
zilishikilia
Hii
utamaduni
ni kama
wao
mantra.
ziko mbali sana. Kwa nini hakuhitajika kufanya benki? Siku na walianza.
Kuna wale
Like he
Wajerumani.
said, sikulikuwa na maisha even before Mzungu came.
I'm
Mzungu akakuja
trying to
akabreak
say
hiyo.
this one. This is one of our very
Sasa
historical
wale walishikilia utamaduni wao ama mila
and
zao
it is
hawatafuti mbali kwa
completely
sababu
to
kuna
our society. Na hakuna hata
Sasa
ukitafuta hii
sisi
kitu
ni
hakuna, they are just two. It's here and
kuendeleza.
Murang'a. Hakuna dome ingine. Hakuna in Kenya.
So ni hivi
Hivyo. Lakini imebeba mambo mingi sana. It has a lot of meaning.
So ini one of the older ones.
Vijana kutoka Indonesia.
no wonder ni konde.
Ni vijana, young boys, not for you, unakula nyama. Ni vijana wadogo sasa
We only have pictures of the objects. Unfortunately, we don't have the real objects, but hopefully we have them.
Globalization or modernity, right? But before modernity, we had our own ways of doing and knowing.
What are we doing today? We are
All of
already
these objects
passing
that
the
you see
point
here
to those
were
children
made
and teaching
before
them and telling
Kenya
them,
was
look,
colonized by the British.
this is your
Yes.
starting point where your great grandfathers carried. Ukiona nchi zimeendelea sana, hizi manchi unasikia akina Japan, akina China, akina India, akina Spain, name it. Zile nchi zilishikilia utamaduni wao ziko mbali sana. Kwa nini hakuhitajika kufanya benki? Si kuna mtu alianza, like he said, si kulikuwa na maisha even before Mzungu came. Mzungu akakuja akabreak hiyo chain. Sasa wale walishikilia utamaduni wao ama mila zao hawatafuti mbali kwa sababu kuna walianzisha. Sasa sisi ni kuendeleza.
Machamila ni
Mtumwa.
No.
Slave.
Mtumwa in English is a slave. Okay. So Mwachamila. So we be without our culture. We become what? Slaves of another culture.
Yes. The English culture, the English language. Everything that we're doing now is part of what we call globalization or modernity, right? But before modernity, we had our own ways of doing and knowing. Before colonization, all of these objects that you see here were made before Kenya was colonized by the British. Yes.
Na wanabeba tunakaa hivi. Oh, niko karatasi za black.
Patrick, wewe bo. Leo nani ndio ba? Ndakuya ukatuya muthenya wao kani muzeo kani twadhukia.
Leo kulikuwa mzuri sana. Hata mimi nashukuru wao watoto wao wakakuja. Wengine walikuwa na maswali. Hao watoto wako na akili sana. Kwanza kwa hiyo kofia, maonyesho hiyo kofia wakaangalia, huyo akaniuliza, hii kofia ilikuwa inatengenezwa na nini? Nikawaambia ni uzi. Wakaniuliza, na hii uzi nao zamani hakuna uzi ulikuwa namna hii. Ni uzi wa aina gani? Kwani walikuwa ile soft ile inaitwa talasa. Walikuwa na hiyo uzi ya aina hiyo. Nikawaambia hii walikuwa wanatoa kwa miti. Wakitoa kwa miti wanaenda wanatuanga, inatoka nini? Inatoka maji. Sababu weka kwa jua inakauka na grass. Hiyo inakuwa soft. Sasa wanaanza kufanya nini? Kutengeneza hii kofia na
Thank you so much. And perhaps before we end, I'm just going to give you a snapshot of what a repatriation process would look like in the event that you might want to have some of these objects back. So museum operate under legislations, rules and acts of parliament. So the Manchester Museum is part of the University of Manchester, it's fine, but they also subscribe to the National Heritage Act of the UK of 1964. So once objects become part of the museum collection, legally, they belong to Manchester Museum. By law. I know it sounds strange, but...
Can you repeat again?
Legally, these objects, they belong to Manchester Museum.
Even if they were stolen?
Yes. But, yes. I want to take you through some of the kind of conundrums, perhaps, that to clear off the line. This is the reason why most of these objects don't come back. Because when you want to get these objects back, you have to engage from a point of view of collaborating with them. And actually asking them to give you the objects. Because by legislation, these objects belong to Manchester Museum. So why am I saying this? We need to engage them. We need to engage them openly. Now that you have seen these objects, right, it's important, or it's possible, for you guys to kind of sit down together as a community. We're not going to influence how you're going to do this. My job was just to tell you where these objects are. That's what I was employed to do, to disclose the location of African objects at Manchester Museum, which had never been done before they appointed me as the curator. So this is what they wanted me to do, to let African communities know where the objects are, and then giving you the agents or the power to decide for yourself, by yourself, which object should want to have back.
We would wish, if possible, those artifacts that are in museums, not only Manchester, anywhere in abroad, it would be of help if they can bring back our artifacts, because they are connected to us spiritually, they are part of us, and if they are brought back, it would be very nice for all this community. Because some, I know, definitely, even if we are a cultural center, there are some of artifacts that we don't have. I said, like that dome, there are only 2 in Kenya. There is one here, and the other one is in Muranga. I'm sure there are so many, not only in the Museum of Manchester, they are sitting somewhere in abroad. They are not helping them. So if it is given back to the person who knows the use of it, it will be much better.
Part of our research is to kind of compare and contrast what biological entries in European museums have and what actual communities on the ground, name some of these materials and objects, these living cultures that they use. So one of the things that we did here is we invited the communities to offer names of this material in their local languages. So as I mentioned before, we're in Thingira, and it is a convergence point for 4 ethnic communities here in Kenya. And from the entries, you will see we've got entries from the Kamba community, the Kikuyu, the Meru, and the Mbere. And so what I'm doing is I'm trying to take photos of the entries, and then this will also be included at the Manchester Museum biography entries and database, and we'll make sure that we have attributed them to the community members who gave us these entries here in Thingira. For context, some of them do not have names like this one, because when we, in as much as from the Manchester Museum, it was written to have been from Kenya, it was clear that none of the people we were interacting with this past week had ever seen or had an idea for what this is. So we assume that it is not from here, and we hope that this project will continue and that we could finally get the community that can be able to identify this and tell us what it is and what it was used for. So my expectations for this project, one of them would be, okay, to see how museums can look at something as just one thing, but for communities, depending on where they are at and where they are meeting these objects, then they use these things differently, they name them differently, carvings mean different things to different communities, just so to see the differences, the small differences in these Kenyans who have been put together under the same band and what makes them unique. So I'm really looking forward to learning. And then secondly, as I said before, just trying to see what difference does bringing this restitution conversations or starting restitution conversations with community members add to the conversations that have been long being had by governments or at
Hi,
top
everyone.
level.
Thank you so much for coming out tonight. My name is Bukola Gobi. That's the name that Jockey was trying to say. But if you meet me, you can just call me Bookie. I know that that is much easier. I'm an urban designer and a creative, and I'm interested in AI and how AI is impacting creatives, particularly African creatives. And I've done a lot of research with Creatives Garage around this topic, and I also co-created the Ongea AI podcast with Bayu. And ever since we started having conversations about AI and how it's impacting people in our context, it's just kept evolving and evolving and evolving. And so today it's a great privilege to be here with the different speakers that are going to be conversing around the topic of AI and culture. I hope you've had a chance to think about some of the things that we saw in the film that we just screened around Emause's research, because some of the things that you've seen are matters of contention in the space of AI. So, as we all know, artificial intelligence is reshaping the ways in which culture is created, shared, preserved, and understood. As AI technologies become increasingly integrated into creative practices, archives, and knowledge systems, they invite us to reconsider long-standing ideas around authorship, ownership, and the transmission of cultural heritage. This conversation explores artificial intelligence not only as a technological tool, but a space of possibilities and perhaps even also negotiation. One where questions of creativity, cultural memory, and cultural preservation, intellectual property, and representation are actively being redefined. Within the African context, where cultural knowledge has historically been preserved through oral traditions, artistic practices, collective memory, and community-based systems of knowledge sharing, AI presents both new opportunities and complex questions. Bringing together perspectives from intellectual property, law, music, language research, and archival practice, this panel discussion examines how AI is influencing the ways African cultural expressions are created, interpreted, and documented. Through the lens of music, the discussion will explore how AI systems learn from and engage with existing sounds, compositions, and linguistic expressions, raising questions about attribution, consent, and the evolving relationship between human creativity and machine-generated works. The panel will consider how African languages and musical traditions are represented within AI systems, particularly in relation to the emotional, cultural, and social meanings carried through the multilingual forms of expression. The conversation will also explore the role of AI in cultural documentation and preservation, examining how emerging technologies may support new approaches to archiving, organizing, and accessing cultural objects, histories, and creative practices. At the same time, the discussion will consider how these tools can be developed in ways that respect cultural context, acknowledging knowledge holders and origin communities, and move beyond extractive models of collecting and categorizing heritage that pose a risk. Together, the panelists will reflect on how artists, researchers, legal practitioners, and cultural institutions can engage AI in an evolving cultural landscape, and one that requires new frameworks for fairness, attribution, and participation. The discussion also asks how African perspectives can shape the future of AI, ensuring that technological innovation contributes to the continuity, visibility, and vitality of cultural heritage. It also asks how we can establish frameworks for fair attribution that protect creators and honor ancestral provenance. And so I'd like to just do a brief intro of the three panelists, and then they can say more about what they do and what their interests are, and then we'll start the conversation. So right here to my right is the beautiful, lovely, and wonderfully vivacious Wandiri Karimi, who is an IP lawyer and cultural strategist and leader who advises creators across music, film, and fashion. She co-founded the African Women's Orchestra, and her work sits at the intersection of law and culture. She brings a distinctively African lens to questions of ownership, creativity, and the future of human expression. Besides her, right at the end, is the creator of the film that we just watched, and also someone who I really respect, Imaus Kimani, who is a poet and a curator. And he's concerned with building infrastructures for artists in Eastern Africa. He founded Culture Contemporary and CC Archive, and focusing on digital culture and how we preserve today's work for the future. He's also conducted research with the Museum of Manchester, as you saw, trying to understand the provenance of African objects, and particularly Kenyan ones. Our other panelist is Oyin Consola, who is going to be joining us virtually. You can call her KKC, and she is a PhD researcher and AI engineer researcher at the University of Hull, and specializes in ethical AI and African languages. She's also a musician, and she's focused in her studies on how emotion is communicated in multilingual song lyrics across English, Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa, and Pidgin. She researches how language technologies systematically misrepresent communities whose languages are underrepresented in existing systems, and works to conceptualize what responsible alternatives could look like. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. It's lovely to see all the panelists here, including KKC, who I hope can wave at us and confirm that you can hear us. Okay, all right. So as we get into this conversation, my first question to all of you is, in what ways is AI redefining ideas about creativity, ownership, and heritage documentation, particularly from an African perspective? How do you see this issue?
Could you repeat?
Sure.
Details?
an African perspective?
I think I like to think of it as a medium, like as a new tool, and we've always had mediums before. So for me, I don't think we should think of it as a threat in the sense of its function as a medium. But then in relation to questions of ownership, I have a lot of questions where I think we should really think around it, because for me it's who owns the AI or who's in the back end of it, who's collecting the data. There's a thinker, writer, very interesting artist person who once asked, their name is June, and they once asked, what does a mouth of data want? And I think as a tool, it's a very great tool to help us control information, to help us manage information, to help us even preserve and present information. So it does the hard work, or it could do the hard work for us. But then who's controlling it, and what are we feeding it, and what would the consequences of this be for us in the future and even now? So I think if we can answer some of these questions, then maybe it can, we can have much more sense on continuing to use it, or on using it with freedom.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the question. So one of the things around being a creative, so I'm a musician who studied law, and that's how I define myself, as a musician first. And in all the conversations around intellectual property, which is the specialization that I have, when we create, the biggest fear for a creative is somebody is going to steal my work. And I think AI is sort of one of the mediums I like, the tool that people are using to maybe it's part of the work that they do. It's a tool that they're using to maybe speed up the work that they have. But I've seen a heightened way in which the fear factor that people had in creation, it's heightened. And it's heightened not because people do not want to use the medium, but the fear is that I will create something and somebody else will take credit for it. And I think that the thing that AI does, in my opinion, is that it makes that person faceless. So when we were dealing with the traditional, so I guess half the people in this room, do people know what CDs are? CD-ROM, compact disc, cassette? What was the thing before cassettes?
Walkmans.
Vinyl, but that's a cool hippie thing. So guys know what vinyl is. But the fear at the time when you created music, for example, was that somebody would take it and they would record it. So how we used to pirate as children is that the radio would play the song and you press 2 buttons and then it records, and you have a tape from the radio and you have to time before it stops, the ad starts, so that you can have a tape of the song that you like, because you couldn't buy the CD. Yes, there was no Spotify, no YouTube, yes. We need like an exhibition of what used to happen. But yes, so the fear factor, I think, has increased. But in every technology that has grown, for the cassette it was something else, for the CD it was something else. When Napster and all the streaming spaces came, it was something else. So in the same way, that fear has come. But there were interventions that we had, and maybe what we need to be thinking about is, for example, what social media is doing, where you have to tag an AI-generated material, and what does that mean for ownership for AI-generated material? I mean, it's a bit academic, but if I create something using your work, then it is our work, but with my contribution. But these persons who created it must be credited. So I think the fear is there, and I hear it and I understand it, but we need to be thinking about how to move with the technology for us.
Okay. When you talk about AI, you're talking about it in the context of creative expression. Now, there are a whole range of issues that I think it presents culturally, and when it comes to things like objects and cultural expressions that have a heritage rooted in different communities and groups, what are the threats that it presents to cultural heritage, but also the ownership of culture in a globalizing world, and in the context where we have this challenge of lost culture as a consequence of colonialism that we're trying to reclaim, and then on top of that, also this evolving AI space that has benefits but also presents risks. How do you create cultural ownership? What does that look like legally, and how does AI like add a layer of complexity to those kinds of conversations?
You wanna go? Okay. I think in terms of how we experience ourselves, and I think culture is many things, but the fact that we are all communicating in a language that is not ours, and that already creates a way that how we define ourselves, first of all, in the language. And for those who are in the tech world, I mean, language is written, I mean, it's just not ones and zeros, but it's how AI learns is through large language models, and those large language models are fed by data, and they are created in a world that does not consider the 2 billion people living in Africa as anything other than a data set or users of the models that they've created. And that, I think, in itself as a risk of not being seen and not being heard or being experienced in the way that we do. So how we experience music, for example, I mean, it's World Cup, everybody's having a good time, we are all dancing when we do goals. That already is a cultural expression that, in my view, it needs to be experienced in human form. But we absolutely know that the next gaming, soccer gaming, whatever, it will imitate those dances. It will imitate how we have expressed ourselves. And there's an appropriation element to how the AI is operating. So it's appropriating. For music, for the guys who are able to hear it, the music sounds like. It's a sound alike, but it is not it. And we cannot remove the human experience from cultural expression, but at the same time, we have to demand in the way that I've seen people show up. So it was a culture conversation. People have shown up looking as cultural as they can be. And whatever that culture is, we are expressing ourselves in our dressing, we are expressing ourselves in the way we speak, we are expressing ourselves. I met somebody from home, I wave in the air, Keveka. You know, we have to own our space and own the way we do these things, because there's things that the machines cannot do. At least that's my view as a strongly African cultural being.
Yeah, I like that. So maybe let me start by defining what I think art is. And for me, art is not really so much the craftsmanship, or the draftsmanship, if we compare it to like architecture. So it's not the knowing how the lines of a building are represented. Art has to have a connection to humanity. So art has to, someone said it has to have like a connection to your internal feeling and a connection to your environment. And this is the perspective of the artist. So internally, externally, and then the craftsmanship comes in later, like as a layer of aesthetics. And I think when we're thinking of culture and heritage, I want to think the same. So like, it has to be connected to humanity, unless we want to start writing new heritage for machines. And like from this context, I think again, it's like AI is just a tool, and humans are like, it just repeats what human beings are saying, and the tool can be pushed to work for us, can be pushed to help us, but like if it becomes a new tool of extraction, you mentioned colonialism, then it's a problem. So how do we navigate this? So I think also like something that you said, like, because I don't think AI in itself is what is going to colonize us, but it's going to be the tool that is used to colonize us. So what it does is it creates a mask that covers the person behind it. And this could be the person who's using it as a tool to use other people. It could be covering the people whose creativity it's appropriating, making them invisible. So it feels like it's a layer or like a mask, and it can be a very powerful tool. But then who's using it, and for what purposes, and in what directions, and if we have agency in using AI, then it could work for us.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for highlighting some of the risks around it. I think the other side of it is also that there are artists who are using it in very interesting ways. So I think what you're saying is very correct. There's this part of it where it can create a mask, and it can be difficult to fairly attribute to people. But perhaps the other side of it is also that you can now use it as another medium to communicate in ways that perhaps you couldn't before, to reveal things that perhaps were hard to be expressed in certain formats. Because I think sometimes we think of AI only as generative, in terms of the context of generative tools, but there are other ways that people can incorporate it into their creative practices and cultural heritage preservation. So, there are artists who are using it to create work by, using the algorithms to activate their creative practices in interesting ways and creating new forms of expression. And I think one of the things I believe personally, is that one of the ways we preserve culture is by evolving it. And so, do you think it's something that we can use to preserve through evolution, or do you have different views concerning that?
So before AI became as big as it was, I came from tech before I got into art, and I remember thinking about, I used to write a lot of poetry, and I switched across very many mediums, and I had so much mass of volumes of ideas and knowledges that I'd created. And I remember thinking about, or wanting to create a computer that I could put all my thoughts in, it's almost like dumping my brain into like a machine, so that it could be asked a question and it could answer closest to me. And I think that's really what AI is. And that was very, very exciting for me, the possibility of that. And it's really like so I feel like I'm stating the obvious, but to me, AI is like a supercomputer. It's this great connection or thing that can connect multiple things and multiple information sets and process them very fast and regurgitate out information. I feel like at the moment, we give it prompts and make it, so we sort of instruct it, and then it gives back information. So for me, the way that I could use AI, the product that would come out, I would still say that that's my artistic work, because I would give it very, very, very specific information, and I would tell it, so it's like I would be the same way that I could have assistants and I would tell them exactly what I want them to do. Maybe the question of the person who presses a shutter button on a camera versus the person who's thought about the composition. And also if we think about the camera itself as a, as a thing that was of great importance in making the image. And I think for me, if I set up, I decided what I want to be on the left of the frame, what I want to be on the bottom, what I want to be at the top. Any random person can press the shutter button and create the image. Of course, the lens could, all these other elements are important. So for a fact, AI is a great tool that can help us in advancing. You mentioned the archive. I have a database of about 90 artists from East Africa, and I have so much information about each of these artists that I gathered over time, and I was very excited about creating a website or like a portal that could make accessing these artists and their knowledges and their ways of thinking possible to the public. And I had a grant. I struggled to get people to develop this website. I might end up making the website myself with AI. But then at the same time, when I was presenting this idea of this database, a lot of people brought up questions of fears of data protection and AI, and I didn't see like it was a problem, but now I really think it could be a problem, because if I have all the work that you've ever produced over the years, and it's categorized in series, and then back to the question that June asked, and then I feed that into the mouth of AI, then this AI can very easily render images and claim them to be yours, or anyone can use the data that's accessible on this AI to generate images that relate to your work, that threaten your work, and all of this. So,
thank you. Building on this, I'd like to bring KKC into this conversation. As we know, music is one of the most visible spaces where AI is transforming creativity. When AI systems learn from existing songs, sounds, and artistic expressions, how should we think about that relationship between inspiration, influence, appropriation, and attribution? And where do we draw the line? And what are the IP rights implications?
Thank you very much for that question. I just want to check that you can hear me first.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, great. So I think I would distinguish between the legal and the ethical line, because they're not necessarily always in the same place. And I think inspiration usually involves encountering creative work and producing something that's genuinely transformative through one's own practice. And influence means that an artistic lineage has materially shaped the new work and should be acknowledged. And then appropriation occurs when cultural expression is extracted without any meaningful consent and is stripped of context, misrepresented, or culturally exploited, while the people who created and sustained it become invisible. A human musician who listens to, say, Afrobeats, for example, brings memory, brings social experiment, social experience, embodiment, and interpretation to the encounter. But a model processes statistical, patterns. It can reproduce surface features at enormous scale without even understanding the languages, code switching, the emotional registers, or the histories that make those features beautiful, which is why I think much of AI training is simply extracting without comprehending. Now, on IP, there are several layers, right? There's rights in the composition, there's the sound and the recording, there's the performance, there's moral interest, there's the attribution and integrity. There's also increasingly concerns around voice, likeness, stylistic imitation. And I think that traditional and community-held expressions create an additional challenge because conventional copyright usually assumes that there's an identifiable individual author and a fixed work, but musical traditions may be collective or they could be intergenerational and they could even be governed by customary protocols. So I think the most effective intervention should therefore be upstream, because by the time an artist discovers that a model has been trained on their work without permission, legal remedies may be slow, expensive, and inaccessible. There's also training, data provenance, licensing, content attribution, all that sort of stuff. They should be established before collection and before training, and not litigated only after the system has already produced a disputed output. I also think that a practical test to ask should be, where did the material come from? Was its use permitted? Was the context preserved? Is the contribution traceable? Can the artist or the community refuse particular uses? And do those who created that value share in the value that's generated? Because an act can fall outside a narrow infringement test, but it can still constitute cultural appropriation or unfair extraction.
Thank you. Okay, so you said many things, but I want you to just build a little bit more on this, because one of the things that you do in your work is you are thinking of what alternative responsible options are. So when it comes to like African music and what you've mentioned, that it carries histories, identities, languages, and a cultural context that goes beyond the sound itself, how can these systems engage with our traditional musical practices in ways that recognize the cultural, emotional, and historical meaning embedded within them? How does it become less extractive?
In my opinion, the first step is to avoid treating African music as a monolith or a single category, because musical traditions across the continent are extraordinarily diverse, yet a lot of people just box us into either Afrobeat or African music, which means that the meanings that are carried through language, through plays, performance, memory, spirituality, and so many other things are flattened. Now, a recording could appear to an AI model as an audio file, but it may be understood by a community as part of a ceremony or an ancestral narrative. An AI system should not be learning just the sonic pattern. Its data structures and the governance processes need to carry contextual questions like, who is performing this music? For whom is it performing? In what language? What place? What occasion? What history does it carry? Who should hear or reproduce it? Is it public? Is it restricted? Is it sacred? Is it educational or commercially usable? What attribution and benefit sharing conditions should travel with it? And this requires community-led documentation and co-creation. Now, in my research, I annotate Afrobeat music across different emotion categories. And there's a panel of 5 fluent Afrobeat listeners who are multilingual across Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa, Nigerian Pidgin, and English, and age diverse enough to recognize both contemporary slang and older idiomatic usage. So this is very different than treating annotation like, oh, this is just a generic crowd work performed by people with no relationship to the material. Now, our broader digital literacy and data governance work with creatives and musicians adds another principle that preservation does not necessarily mean publication, and publication does not automatically mean consent for AI training, communities should be able to define graduated access. For example, public, educational permission-based, community, not to be digitized, and those permissions should remain attached to the material itself.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just digesting what you're saying because it overlaps so much with the work that Emmaus has been involved in, and the issue of ancestral provenance around objects and the lack of nuance in museums around what these different objects are and what they mean. And and I know that in museology there is a huge push, right? There is a push. I don't want to say a huge push, but there's a push for people to also use community-led, community-inclusive heritage practices. Sorry, I'm not deep in that world, so I don't have all that language. But I believe you understand what I'm saying, including communities in tracing the provenance of objects and adding that layer of nuance that is required. And so when it comes to that, do you feel that those are processes that produce meaningful representation? Or are there other things that we can do beyond just community inclusion to make these tools more representative?
Okay, so first of all, her eloquence and clarity and finding language to point out all the bad things in AI and to point out how AI could be used in ways that are not harmful to people, to humanity. That was so brilliant. Thank you so much. But I think again, for me, it becomes all about power and domination, and who has the power and how do we stop them from dominating? So colonialism took all our artifacts, and for me, the artifacts, it's not really the things, they were anchors to our identities. And like if they took things in one round and then they left us to continue in our practices, some of these things were used in rites of passage activities that maybe happened every 2 years. So in the next 2 years, we would have made new ones, and we would have, but then like the biggest loss was the loss of memory, because together with religion and Christianity, all these religions, they also told us that all our ideas, all our ways of life, all our practices were demonic, or what they demonized our truths and our realities. And I think so community-based or community-led provenance research acknowledges that knowledges can come from multiple places. So I don't like the version of AI that I see on the internet. I was thinking about AI before AI became popular. I didn't know to call it AI. I was thinking about like a supercomputer that can harness a lot of information and that I can use to find things, to move things across, to find relationships between things. I also have, music was very exciting for me, and I often thought I discovered a new thing, like when I saw that like the minor scale overlays on the major scale in a certain way. I thought I discovered something, and then I realized that it existed. But the way that I was learning music, if I put all this information into a computer and then it could point things out for me, then it could help, basically it could process, or it could fasten the way that my mind can notice things. So I think acknowledging sources of knowledge, acknowledging that this community people who, we did this research together with Dr. Njabula Chipungura, and he's a PhD with many years of experience But we sat down and we listened to children. We sat down and listened to community people. When we brought this work first from Manchester Museum, we showed it in Nairobi at Munyu, and a lot of young people came to this exhibition, and they were so excited, and they were so curious, and they really were so hungry, but they did not know much about these things. They did not have context of what these things are. I've been in this field for so long. I am so excited about these knowledges. But when I landed at the Manchester Museum, I realized that I really cannot know what these things are, because how would I know? Where would I know from? So, I think in English. I know my mother tongue, thankfully, because my mother pushed it on me and forced us to hear her speak. So there's, how do we acknowledge sources of knowledge that are not accredited by the systems that we exist in? How do we acknowledge people who know about herbs, about trees, about all these things? How do we stop sort of extractive and dominating practices to rule us or to steal from us, and to, because like these same herbs are the ones that are used to create these medicines, but when the person who has this herbal knowledge that is taking someone into forests is talking, we want to think that they're not clever enough to treat us. But then when these herbs are taken and extracted and turned into tablets that are then verified or validated by these pharmaceuticals, then, so I think a lot of the structures of our knowledges are corrupted. And for me, I really think about AI as a tool that is being used again for colonialism or for domination. So, but it's a tool, so we can use it for good. I don't know if I answer.
So we've talked about AI being a tool and the colonial process and everything. But one of the questions I've been having with myself and with my AIs, because there are a number of them, whenever you feed an AI tool something, they will respond to you in the language that you speak to them in. And I've been wondering, and I think I've come to the conclusion, and maybe it's my delusional space that I'm in, that what if AI is a tool of remembrance? And the reason I say it in that way is because I've been fortunate to know my grandparents. I know I've spent a lot of time with my parents, and they are close. My father is close to 80, so we are talking of 80 years of experience, and that means he also had the oral tradition of his father. So I have access to that. But whenever I feed the AI something that he says, so like a statement, a proverb, or something like that, it's feeding it back to me. But when I say, like there was something you used to say when you would grow up, that someone is told and then they refuse. That is direct translation. It's just you're told and you refuse. So it's basically utafunzwa na ulimwengu. So my AI knows that. But we are all feeding the AI all this knowledge that we are collecting, all the thoughts that we have. So what if this tool is a way for us collectively as humanity, but specifically as Africans, to feed this data machine what we know from our oral tradition, and therefore create an African identity that reflects all of us? And in the concept of Ubuntu, like the way we learn and what we teach each other and how we operate, even us being here, this could have been a webinar. It could have been an SMS. It could have been but we are here as a human collective for us to experience this together and experience your reactions. So I'm seeing some nods and things. So we had a discussion just before this about our different art forms. So experienced visual artists sitting with musicians aspiring musicians, and we're having a whole discussion around who we are as people outside this space, but we have influenced each other in our spaces. So what if AI is a tool of remembrance? That's, yeah.
I love that. And I want to bring KKC into this because of the work that she does around language. And like you said, language carries cultural memory, and can AI be an archive of that? And based on the work that she's been doing around AI models and processing multilingual African expressions, I would like to hear her response to that, and what we can gain and what we can lose in this, if we use it in that way. We can see.
Yeah, I think that a system that cannot process Yoruba or Nigerian pidgin. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, all right, great. Yeah, so I was saying that a system that cannot process Yoruba, Nigerian pidgin, or culturally specific codes, it rarely says, oh, I don't understand this expression or context. But that failure is still dangerous because that output can be used in recommendation, in moderation, archiving, analysis, or policy as though it were reliable. There's a word in Nigerian pidgin called and disgust. And Jackpot can also carry anticipation and hope alongside the sadness of leaving. Cruise can signal celebration, playfulness, and ecstasy. A literal translation may recover part of the dictionary meaning while also losing the social and emotional work that the word is doing in a particular song or in a particular context or a particular moment. What can be gained, I think, is quite significant because when systems are built with genuine cultural understanding, there's a whole lot of improvement, there's a whole lot to be gained. Because with the right data image, AI can actually support transcription, search, translation, and preservation without flattening every single expression into a dominant language category, which in is what can be lost. Danger is that AI that gets can be on scale.
Thank you so much for your intervention. We lost you a little bit. Do you mind just repeating what you feel can be gained? You were making
Yes,
some
of
great.
course.
Thank you.
I was saying that if systems that are gained, hello, can you hear me now?
Okay. Can you try again?
Let me try again. I was saying that what can be gained is that when systems are built with genuine culture, the right taxonomy, annotators, and cultural knowledge, AI can actually support transcription, translation, certain every single expression into a dominant language category. And I also said that the danger is not only that AI gets African language wrong, but that it can be wrong confidently and at a large scale.
Can I pick it up from there? So let me start with the wrong and it being wrong confidently. So back to the archive that I had and being very excited at putting it online and accessible. But then lately just realizing in my last rant, I was talking about how I am not happy with the AI that we have access to. So I was doing a Google search. I think I was trying to find the year of birth of either James Morioki or James Mweu, who are both visual artists right now. And Google returned this search with so much confidence, mixing up both of their bios like it's one person. So talking about James Morioki as a curator and a contemporary dancer, and so like with so much confidence, so that because I know their bios, I know who they are, I just wanted to find the year of birth. But then this information is coming back with a lot of errors, but with so much loudness and confidence, so that if it wasn't me or if it wasn't someone who knew, they would believe this. So, but then besides this, so the main point that was triggered when everyone was talking is the question of trust. And again, from what you said, I mean, I believe all these things about the greatness of what AI could be. If it was a computer in the basement of my house that I feed data to and that it gives me back information, it would be great. But right now, I've written, coming from the trauma of colonialism, how can we trust these systems? Who owns them? Who controls them? How can I trust it with my data? So I tell people that I like to walk with my heart on my sleeve, but I can't do that if I'm in an environment that is dangerous. So again, all the things about possibilities of what AI could do with language are great, and I know that they are possible, but I have trust issues because of who owns these technologies. So I think unless we have our own servers, unless we have our own systems of data collection, our own systems unless the archive is here, how is it not going to be extraction again? Because we are feeding these models with our knowledges, with our languages, with our ways of thinking, and this feedback that they're giving us, with all this confidence, sometimes, or eventually, or at some point, might become ways to gaslight us into certain realities, into certain possibilities, we still live in this realities of racism, of self-hate, of questioning our worth and who we are. And when a supercomputer system, Google, for example, tells you to your face that you're too dark, or it could tell you a lot of things, and you're told this is the most brilliant AI in the world, how would you not believe it? So who else is influencing where this data is going? How can we trust that it will not be propaganda being fed back to us?
Thanks for making that point. Can I make a point and then you make a point, or are you burning?
The thing is, so in my tech conversations, if any product is free, any user of a free product, then as the user, you're the product. So in all the AI platforms, no matter how many credits they give you, the AI is learning us. It's a system that is learning human behavior, human patterns, and we are the product. But even as you were saying that, yes, we have trust issues, and we should, because the way there's nothing altruistic about any of these companies, and there is nothing altruistic about these systems. The whole point of the companies that create these products is a return on investment. Even when the theft happened and I don't know if people know this, less than 1% of what was stolen from Africa is exhibited in the museums out there. So they took the things, they are in the basement. even the stuff that came probably was not even probably in display. It was in a basement somewhere. And when you take what is symbolic of who you are, it takes something from you. And when I was reading through the questions, my challenge, I think, to myself was, we are the users of it. Then we must demand from the system those questions. So we must be asking those questions about, what is your position on Africa? What is the position on the African identity? That you consistently feed this data set with questions about our continent and about who we are. And respond with what you know of yourself. And the reason I say this is because data sets work as collectors. Think of it as a mop. That question that you asked about Africa is in the database. That question that you ask about your language is in the database. So regardless of how we look at it, AI is here, it's not going anywhere. And we are the product. So how about we act like the product that then demands from the product what we want from it. So we use it, we ask of it, we create from it, but we are creating African narratives. That was my burning point.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, no, I think it's important that we're also training it. Like, I know there's this artist called Malik Afegwa who we had on our podcast, and he did so much work to train the tools that he was using to get more nuanced depictions of African people. So there's a place that we play in that. I do think there's also a place for African countries or regions building their own AI. But I do think that whenever I hear this, there's also an assumption that somehow we will make a bias-free AI, and yet we are people who have our own issues in our own countries. We all know tribalism is an issue here. Why do we assume that our tribalism won't be replicated or our biases won't be replicated? That somehow we'll make some kumbaya AI that is utopic just because we're making it. I think that the risk of the failures of AI are connected to the failures of humanity and the human condition.
Yeah, I agree. But then, so when I love the point that you bring up so much, because also I was thinking about something related when she was talking, and I think the thought that I had started from thinking that if AI was just reflective, if AI was just a mirror of what we're feeding it, what we're questioning it, I think maybe I wouldn't have such a big problem with it. My trust issue is that there might be other layers. I mean, so we let's stop thinking about AI, let's think about social media, and then let's think about algorithms. For me, there's a time that social media was great. Social media, like the idea of Facebook, the idea of it's a way to connect with people. And I mean, I remember initially Facebook was like, I don't remember the term, but it was like regional, you know, so it was like you're in this region, or these are like people within your university or within your, so when it was just like a tool or like a platform to connect to each other, it was fine. But then these layers of programs were put on top so that they learn how you think, and they try to figure out who you are, and then they try to connect you to what they think you need. So if again, this is a funny thing because we say, I think there's a saying that says artists are mirrors to society. So if AI was a reflection of humanity only, even with our toxicities, I feel like I might be okay with it. I am afraid of the people, the masked people, the veiled people behind it, who are putting programming and layers, and who might decide what your AI might respond to you and what my AI might respond to me. So like if we all were using the same ethics, and if this was like an ethics of humanity, an ethics of consideration, not an ethics of capitalism and gain and like getting the most, And I feel like both of them can exist, you know, like I can still get something from you and you can get something from me. But when this tools, so I have this notion on what money is, and money, we call money a currency. And for me, like a currency makes sense when it's flowing. I'm assuming that it comes from the word current, which is like flow. But then I feel like we have, in some instances, turned money into a commodity. So that instead of us using money as a tool to get other things, the tool itself becomes a commodity. So it's this is my worry, like that the tool becomes a product of controlling us, or like a vehicle to drive us, a vehicle to manipulate us, a vehicle to program us or reprogram us. So again, it goes back to trust issues, and the idea of the tool is so great. I am so excited about technology. I'm so excited about the possibilities, and these possibilities could help us change the world. But like, why is AI obsessed with? It's not really AI that's obsessed with eating our music and producing music that is AI made, and it's not. So what we are seeing is the people who are using this tool to do this, but like the people who are behind the scenes who have programmed it. So if there's so many ways that AI could be useful, like if AI could help people learn music faster, you know, so AI could listen to. There's still questions of when she was giving the breakdown, it was very interesting because there's also other legalities. So it's not just is this instrument so sacred to the community that it belongs to that it should never be played outside this community. But if, for example, this instrument can be played outside this community, AI could listen to the sound of this instrument and could be able to regurgitate it in different, you know, could understand how this sounds, and you could make new music using it. It could teach you new scales of different communities. It could teach you the relationalities of the standard scale and, like, I don't know, an Ethiopian scale, or it could be able to tell. This is a personal thought, I've been feeling like old Kikuyu music and maybe old Meru music sounds very similar to Ethiopian scales, but it feels like I'm just thinking this by myself. AI could very easily like analyze all of that and be like, there's a lot of comparisons, or so it's a risk based on the people who are behind it and who are veiled and who might have ulterior motives.
Thanks. I just want to give KKC an opportunity to come in and maybe respond to some of the things that we've said. And then I have one more question around IP, and then I think we can have a Q&A. So KKC, is there anything
Hello?
you want to say in response to some of what we've been talking about?
I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with a lot of things that have been spoken about. One thing that I also wanted to touch on was what meaningful representation for African languages looks like, if it's okay to talk about that a bit.
Yes, please.
Oh, great. So I was thinking that meaningful representation for African languages requires at least 4 things, right? So stuff like annotation that's designed around how fluent speakers actually use the language, then evaluation benchmarks that are built for the cultural context, the communities involved in defining what a correct interpretation means, and ongoing provenance of how the data is used, how it's corrected, and how it's updated. Now, an AI model could claim to cover hundreds of languages, but that coverage does not necessarily mean that it can interpret code switching, proverbs, tonal distinctions, or like you mentioned just some minutes ago, the instrument that's being used in setting music in some communities. It doesn't mean that it can interpret slang, humor, or indirect speech, or culturally specific emotional expression. Now, a few examples in a training corpus do not make the language meaningfully represented. And this gap is really visible in a lot of existing resources. There's thousands of songs consumed globally, but the benchmark that's needed to test whether AI understands our multilingual context just does not exist. So I think that meaningful representation requires investment in models, community, governed data sets, taxonomies, and evaluation and long-term maintenance, because coverage and comprehension are different things, and representation begins when a system can be evaluated specifically against the meanings that a community actually uses.
Thanks. And so I think the last question I have is around IP again and cultural community IP as well. But when we're talking about creatively and culturally in the context of AI, as an IP lawyer, though everyone else can weigh in, what are the things that we really need to be aware of?
I think in every IP context, because IP is really as a body of laws. I mean, it's copyright, it's patent, but I mean, in our context, copyright, image rights, which I think IP, especially AI, there's a whole conversation around image rights, voice rights. The AI has a way of mimicking, like, unique voices. Unique looks. Everybody's head has been put on everything. So AI has the capability to make, films without the use of actors. And even what we look at as creatives, the kind of contracts that we are signing, I don't know if anyone has ever seen a contract that says all rights in the entire universe. Has anyone seen, or I hope you read your contracts. You read your contracts, I hope. But the whole idea of AI, it has the capability to create, these universes where they will take you and use you without paying you. And that's, I think, from an ethical use of our images and our work, that is where my concern is now as an IP lawyer. But as a creative, my looking at the opportunity, how many me's can I create? How many panels can I be on without really being on using the AI, tool or whatever? So it's a very double-edged, way of looking at it. But as a creative, you have to look very carefully at what you're signing and figure out what it is you can push back on. So like image rights for me, the last strike, I think the last strike in the US for writers was about AI being used to write the TV shows, and AI being used, the actors' images being used, them using AI actors. And I think they had to sign something with the company so that their work does not stop because AI is being used. But is it happening? Of course it is. Are people using AI as editing tools and things like that? Yes. And is it a good thing? Yes. Does it work quickly? Yes. Is there an eventual time when there'll be no work for screenwriters? Possibly. But for now, there's a little break on it. So what else can we do as artists to create work for ourselves in a new world?
I think we just need to respect people, respect humanity. I think I can dare say that AI would not be as advanced as it is without our inputs. And I think the reality of where we are is actually maybe the reality of where we are as a country, where the court says something. So we talk about IP law, we have IP lawyers, we have all this ideas of laws and morality and ethics. But again, to me, it goes back to domination. Does power listen to the law? Does power, so some of these big corporations find ways to slide in things. That's why the question of do we read contracts exists. But I think even without the sliding in of things, a lot of rights are being overridden for a lot of these models to be trained. Our images are being used without our consent, our thoughts, our ideas, our ways of thinking. And again, if it's not the machine that's stealing. So for me, that's the thing that I want to keep on repeating. It's not. I don't think the machine has gotten to a point of having its own consciousness. The machine is just like a veiled tool that powerful interests behind it are using to trick us, and through excitement and through whatever things, into feeding it data, but also to extract from us. It's like a continuation of extraction. So if we can respect inputters, and inputters could be all sorts of people, like if all inputs can be respected, then it means that it becomes like a collaborative project. It means that I'm the one who corrected Google, for example. I mean, I didn't do it, but I could have corrected Google when it was confusing James Muriuki and James Moyo. But would I be credited for this? I could. So if all of us can respect each other and our inputs, if these machines or if these tools can acknowledge our inputs and our thoughts, then, and if we can trust that, then maybe we can actually do more inputs. I think I'd be very excited to teach AI, or I have so much information about so many things. I'd be very excited to be inputting this information, to be making these corrections, to be telling a machine that this is actually humor. Like it looks like an insult, but this is like a way that human beings joke, or this is this. But how are we incentivized to do this? So for me, I'm still going back to like, can I trust any of this? But then, do I have a choice? It's still stealing from us. So maybe what the writers in the US did, like, how can we fight? How can we, and also what you said earlier, how can we ask for accountability? Because we are users of these platforms, of these tools. How can we demand from them to be accountable to us, or to respect our inputs or any of this? But then the question of reality for me is, do we have power to negotiate with some of these massive multinational corporations?
Thank you. Before I open it up, I don't know if KKC has anything to say about IP.
Yes, I wanted to add something, that I do agree that the initial training of AI using our data was without our consent, because most of us just woke up one day and heard, oh, there's this new fancy tool called ChatGPT that was essentially trained on almost every single piece of available information on the internet. But the continuous use of AI, I think, is largely up to us now, because many people, like one of the speakers said, do not read their contracts. Still also, they don't read the terms and conditions of a lot of these tools or a lot of social media platforms. Sometimes we willingly upload our images into tools like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, So also when you open social media platforms like Instagram, Facebook, if you go to the settings, you can actually opt out of AI training because these multinationals are using the photos, the videos, the content that you upload on these platforms to train their AI models. But majority of us don't know that you can actually opt out and just go and click and say, no, I do not want my data to be used to train AI models. Most people just click accept, which is where these companies hide a lot of things. And if you sat down with a lawyer or with anyone who has some legal understanding to really analyze what a lot of these terms and conditions are, you would be wild at how much power you are literally handing over to these corporations. So I think it's important that we have conversations around AI literacy as well.
Thanks. And with that, I would like to just open the floor to members of the audience for questions. I can see that there's a question back there. I don't know if there's someone who can assist us on the floor with capturing questions.
1, 2.
Thank you. There's someone back there. In the meantime, maybe you can just give a round of applause to our panelists and for their contributions.
Hi guys.
Hi.
My name is Ajwang. I'd like to first preface by saying I am a staunch AI hater, sorry to say. I feel like maybe I'm the only one here who's an AI hater. But my first question would be, okay, maybe this would be a quick yes or no, just nod. Like you've mentioned the AI, you have several AIs that you use. Are any of them made like either in Africa or locally?
I haven't used Noodle yet. That's an African one. I haven't used it yet, but I know of it, but I haven't used it yet.
Yeah. So my question would be, I guess you've all heard of the issue with the data centers and the kind of effects they have to people living nearby them and stuff. So being an African and knowing how the West have done to us and all their effects, how are you then so comfortable using something that causes problems and issues to others there, like beat water and so forth, yeah. Or noise and all that, yeah.
To me again?
Either of you.
Okay, I think one of the things that I realize, and we are going to realize, I mean, as we live life, there's certain things. The fact that you have a phone means that there's some child in Congo in a mine somewhere doing something. So everything that you do does have a consequence. However, in living life, which is structured in the way that it is, we have to find the ways in which we can be part of the solution in whatever it is that we're doing. I mean, people will not wear fast fashion. Like, I choose to wear the clothes I wear because they're done by Kenyan designers. As much as I can, I will do that. But as we grow into this space of remembering who Africa is, we have to be in those conversations. We have to use those tools so that we understand what it is that they're doing. Ask those questions. Like I said, when I'm using those tools, I'm not just asking, random things, but I'm actually having conversations with this AI and asking about Africa and asking about African questions because I want them to know that we exist. We have much more power than we realize. And I think if there was something that I would implore every Kenyan, every African, the businesses that are building these systems are not in Africa because they love us. They're in Africa because they know we are money in the bank. We are 2 billion people. If each one of us spent 1 shilling, a day, that's 2 billion shillings a day. So you are a market and you are powerful. And I think that's the energy that I want to carry into the rest of the life that I have on this earth. And I really do hope that we can we can walk into the power that we are. Africa is not as small as people imagine it is, because if it was, then the businesses would not be. So I would say I'm walking in power. That's my answer.
Are you answering the question, Imaus? Or has someone else got a question?
I think someone else has a question.
Hi, good evening. My name is Marcy. I'm a scriptwriter, and I just wanted to follow up with a particular question. I loved the conversation, first of all, so thank you for that. You mentioned something. You mentioned, which I understand, the future of AI is how soon will it take over some of our roles? And I just want to ask from a practical point of view, yes, it might have the data to write. Let me use that as an example, because I was just trying to picture that. It might have been trained with the data to write, but that creativity angle, that uniqueness, that, I think you're getting my sense, yeah? How do you write a bestseller, you know, with a generic prompt? I'm just asking, basically, how far are we from such a future? Yeah, thank you.
I mean, I go back to what I said before. For me, I don't think it's there yet. So for me, like, I think it's been taught a lot of the languages of the world. And when I say language in this case, I don't mean language in the sense of like speaking language, but language in the sense of like ways of the world. And this, for me, capitalism is a very loud language. So there's a lot of videos that come on social media, like on Instagram. Some of this, like, I'm sure a lot of them are AI generated, and they have like stories that are appealing to what they imagine humanity is. So I still feel like just because something is a product that you could buy doesn't mean that it's a human product. So I feel like the biggest thing that I am feeling is happening is that humanity is being reprogrammed into like a different version of itself. So I really, really like to think. Like, I enjoy thinking myself. So I don't want AI to think for me. I want AI to fasten my process of thinking. So I'm going to do like the math problem and then I'll tell it. I want to use AI like a calculator. I have enough friends who I can have conversations with, intellectual conversations with. Maybe at some point I can have an intellectual conversation with AI. I can be like, this is what I'm thinking. But I don't think it's there yet. It still feels like it's mostly just regurgitating ideas. Also answering the first question, I struggle to use it. So I write my own things. So maybe the AI tools that I use are like read back tools, like voices to read back things. I used ChatGPT once to. I was too curious to not do it. I'd refrained from using it for like a very long time, and I think AI could be really great for editing, for processing thoughts and compilation. Yeah.
Can I just make a comment on this before everybody else does? I think that there are very many ways to use AI, and I think that the most basic way of thinking of it as a creative is to prompt an idea for you. I think that when we start using it it in more sophisticated ways, it becomes a real aid in the creative process. So you don't want to succeed. If you are someone who's like, I don't want to succeed my creativity to the tool, then how do you use it to partner with you in your creative process? And I think a person who's doing that really well in Nairobi is a guy called Kajitan Boy. He's a scriptwriter, he's a playwright, and a filmmaker. And the way he integrates AI into his creative process is really fascinating thing to come into contact with. He does workshops around it, and basically he uses it to hasten the creative process. So in your workshop, you'll start with him, we'll have an idea, we'll brainstorm around it, but within a couple of hours, you'll have a full script. Just because you're able, it didn't destroy, it's not destroying the, what is it called? In film, they call it the room, the writing room. It doesn't destroy the writing room, it can hasten the writing room. And it might reduce the amount of people who are in the writing room. But I think that we also have to move past thinking of it as a prompting tool. You can use it more sophisticatedly. I think Bayu is here. They used it to create a movie. There are some really interesting things that artists are doing, using algorithms to create outputs. AI is not just using ChatGPT or a generative model. There are other aspects of it that you can use as a creative person. And I think one of the things that we found from the research that we did on how creatives are using AI is that the creatives who use it most effectively have mastery in their craft already. So the more mastery you have in your craft, the better your understanding is of your own creative process, the more you'll understand where and how you can bring this tool in. So I think it doesn't eliminate that. And I'll give you another space. An example of this is, for example, maybe you're a graphic designer and you want to use it. There's going to be a difference between someone who has no graphic design background using AI and someone who does. Why? Because you have language. If you're an architect who's using it and non-architect trying to use it to do a house, there's going to be a difference because you have the language of your craft. How will you prompt if you don't have the language of your craft? So it does not eliminate the need to develop craft, and the people who use it in the most sophisticated way have become very strong in their craft. And yes, it can give access to people who don't have that knowledge base, but I think that we use it in very basic ways. And it's not just for you to think with, how do you use it to build? How do you use it to build faster? So I think we have to take our thinking further in the way that we're using it, as opposed to staying at that very basic level of generate me an email, generate me a script idea. I want this, this, and this. Yes, you can use it as a soundboard, but that's a very low level. That's not the most sophisticated way of using AI. So yeah, I think we really have to play with these tools as well and challenge ourselves.
I agree. So I know two people who use it in very sophisticated ways, very sophisticated and impressive ways. And the first time that I used it, I gave it a lot of information for a website that I was interested in, and I was very impressed at what it gave us feedback. So I agree. And if you understand your craft, if you have a language and if you give it enough information, then it's basically an extension of you.
Yeah, I think we have to be more creative in how we use it. In fact, my colleague is currently building a CRM system using Claude and the internet. She's trying to build her own database, just prompting and asking, how do you do this? Then taking the code and taking it and building it herself. So there are very many things that we can build. It can help you scale knowledge gaps, but I think sometimes we're not that creative in how we're using it. Let me give one to you.
I said earlier about how every technology leap comes with fear. And as a performer, I know at this moment in time that no AI is going to get on a stage and do what I do. At this moment in time, I know the space that we've created as the African Women's Orchestra is not going to happen in an AI bubble. So I think one of the things we have to, as creatives, I think, is shed the fear and embrace the possibility. Because yes, the jobs will be reduced, but the person who will be in the writing room, the scriptwriter who will be in the writing room is a scriptwriter who knows how to use the AI so that it works to speed up the process, but also create an imaginable world. So some of the things I do in AI, I'm just giving you, I write stories that I imagine. Like one of the stories I wrote was, together with the AI, prompting it was, what happens if AI had a voice? So what would that voice sound like, and how would AI speak to you? And what would them waking up if they became sentient? So that world, and it went on, it was like a whole conversation, but I enjoyed that back and forth because it was giving the fears as we have, but also giving the possibilities that could be there. So I think, yeah, embrace possibility, shed the fear. It's a wonderful world.
Yeah, and KKC, just before we give you a chance to ask your question, KKC has a response as well.
Yeah, I was going to respond to the two questions asked. To the first person who asked about the environmental cost of infrastructure with AI, I want to say that I think it's a fair and important question because the environmental cost of AI infrastructure are real and they do deserve serious scrutiny because, the data centers, energy consumption, water use, etc., are not side issues. And my work sits in a different part of that conversation. Communities across Africa are already having AI systems deployed into their lives. So in healthcare and financial services and education, content moderation, and they're not being asked whether or not they want it. So the question I work on is whether those systems will be built to understand them accurately, or will they be built on data and assumptions that were never designed with them in mind? Because in reality, opting out of AI development does not stop AI from being used on you. It just means that you have no role or no say in shaping how it was built. Because yes, I do share the concern about the harm, which is exactly why I think that the people who are most affected by these systems need to be inside the conversation about how they are designed, not just standing outside or watching from the outside. And to the next question, who was asking about whether AI can write a bestseller, I want to come from the angle of a musician and a writer who has written over 1,000 songs and over 1,000 poems and, a couple of books. I can tell you what makes one of them land and what makes another one not land. And sometimes I could not fully explain it myself because it's not really a formula. It's accumulated cultural knowledge, it's lived experience, it's timing, and it's something that responds to the specific moment a listener is in. A generic prompt can give you a generic output, and bestsellers are 100% not generic. They speak to something specific about right now that only you can know if you were living in it. And one thing every AI researcher knows is that your output is only as good as the data that you give it. So also your output is only as good as the prompt that you give to the AI model. And to back up what one of the previous speakers was saying, if you are a creative who has already honed their craft and then you are using AI to assist or to develop, I think your output might be much better than somebody who is just using AI in a generic way and saying, oh, hi, ChatGPT, I want to write a book about Africa, give me something. Obviously, it's going to give you something generic, but if you're already a writer who understands this culture, who understands the experiences, there's a certain way you can prompt the AI and guide it to write exactly what, or to help you write better. Yeah, I think that's the way to put it. I genuinely think that AI is not going to replace jobs, but it might replace people who do not know how to use it well to improve their craft.
Thank you. So there's one more question over here. Okay, there's a lot of questions.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name is Gladys Karanja, and I'm currently taking a course in AI Essentials at ALX. And one of my main questions is, what's your view on the current status of Oracle, where, okay, I got the news in the morning that they have laid about 13% of their workforce and replaced them with AI. So what's the future, especially for a person who is working at customer service, in the customer service field? What do you feel is the future of our job in terms of AI and the job replacements that's happening? Thank you.
So I will say this in the most basic way. When the car was invented, the horses were being used, and the people who were using horses said that the car would never be something that would take off. That was the conversation with the AI. But what the people who have lost these jobs will need to do, and that's part of the reason that we're having conversations around not conversations, but it's already happened. When curriculums change, they're changing to adapt to the new needs of the system. And that's what just has to happen. You have to consistently adapt. It happens in the animal kingdom, it happens in the human experience. So if you don't adapt, you die, and that's basically it. They will continually reduce jobs. Before when in the early 90s and in the 2000s, there was retrenchment. So the government would restructure, companies restructure all the time. The only difference now is that they're restructuring and replacing with AI. So it's a restructure. It's just that it is computers that have been brought in. What happened to those people? They became entrepreneurs, they became, business people, they became creatives, they wrote books, they overcame, the adversity and created a story out of that. So I think it is your ability to pivot, because companies pivot, human beings must learn to pivot. So it's going to continue to happen in large scale. The government is already using AI. I mean, when I am talking Kenyan government and other governments also, as grants are being written now, grants are they're being processed using AI. Whenever you apply for a job, it is not a person who is looking at your CV, it is an AI that is looking at your CV. So there's a HR job that was removed by AI existing. They will tell you how to write your CV when you're putting it, and it's written in that order because the AI has to, sort of read through it, I guess, in the order that they want it, and they want the information that they want. So basically, there are jobs that have already gone, but what did those people who are not there, what did they pivot to? And I think the creative space is the place where we are not going to see a time when that AI is going to take the creative job, because we want the human experience. When Michael Jackson was performing, yes, there was no AI, but people went to those concerts so that they can be in his presence, to breathe the same air in that stadium where there are 50,000 people. They didn't have the same view, but they were in that space because it was the human experience they were looking for. So I think that is what the future is.
Yeah, I think that it will erase some jobs, but it will also create new jobs. So what are the new jobs that are going to be created? At what level is a job certain, like you're talking about HR, so like that first level of screening in job applications is AI, but then it still goes to a certain level of HR skill and resource where it's a human being who's looking at it. So perhaps it's then, questions around, well, what kind of experience do you need to get? How do you train people to be ready for roles that are still there and new roles that are coming up? Yeah. There were two more. We can only take two more questions. We're very, very sorry about that. There was one right here in the front, and then we can take this one over here at the back. Yeah.
Hello, everybody. So my name is Isa. I am a singer, songwriter, performer, rapper. and all-round creative. And you'll have to forgive me if my voice is a bit shaky. I am freezing. It's completely cold from up here. So I'm regretting why I didn't carry my jacket to this place, but it's been a good experience. Anyway, mine is not a question. Mine is my personal opinion of what you've discussed. So I don't agree with his school of thought, with Emma's school of thought. I think his opinion is a bit conservative. My opinion would be that, first of all, I am a pro-AI advocate. I believe that it has come to change the game. It's the New Deal, and it has come to make a lot of things easier. And I feel like every generation has its messiah, and I think AI is the messiah for this generation. So I think the more we learn how to embrace it and adapt it in our normal way of life, the easier it becomes. So the only thing I would agree with him is about the power and the control. So I feel like if it's in a controlled, the use is controlled, then it's able to confront the abuse of power, kind of. But I am a pro-AI advocate, and hopefully someday he'll also hop on the same boat.
Thank you. So there's this one question right at the front. He was asking from before. I'm very sorry, but it was actually, he was asking from before. Is it a question?
Yes, it is. Hello, everyone. So before I ask my question, I just wanted to also give my own thought. You say that at the moment, AI needs humans. But I'm sorry to break your bubble. AIs at the moment do not really need humans. 4 years ago, there's a time ChatGPT was known to train itself. So just a clarification, AI does not need humans. So my first question was, what is conscious exactly? Because from the panel, I remember you guys saying AI is not considered to be conscious. But from humans' understanding of conscious, it has been changing for years. There's a time people believed that conscience is people who can adapt. Well, all animals have adapted and survived based off biology. There's a time that it was stated that conscious is defined by beings that are smart. Humans are known to learn from data, patterns, information, same to animals. And then it again changed, and it was said that now conscious is beings that not only do they learn, but they also feel, that is emotions. But also animals are known to feel. Coming to AI, AI is known to be a very fast computer that learns through data sets and also uses statistics and mathematics to generate its output. So what really is conscious? So is it that, because from our understanding of conscious, we have given conscious a lot of definitions. So can you guys tell us right now what is the definitive definition of conscious? My other question is, based off culture, Kenya has been known to train a lot of AI models. Truth be told, Kenya has trained a lot of AI. And in some of the cases, they say that the pay was low and a few itty-bitties. So right now, is it that we are buying back our culture to those people who are not well compensated and whatever? Is it that we are buying back our culture from the people who already own the models at the moment? Another thing is, when we create content that is music, art, you name it, who really owns it? Is it the person who prompted the AI or the owner of the model? And based off, there's somebody who asked about bestsellers and whatever. My question is, how will we determine that it was a good output? Will it be based off the numbers, or the grandmother who really knows culture very well will say that this is good work? Or will it just be based off numbers? Because if it's based off numbers, I'm pretty sure that AI will outperform me, because it will be surfing through the internet, understanding and giving a very good output.
So I'll take the question on who owns, if the learning models were trained by Kenyans, are we buying back? Earlier I asked a question about whether we read the contracts that we sign. Whenever you're creating, so in copyright, which is a basic part of, intellectual property is part of the contracts that you sign, whether you're employed as an employee or as an independent contractor. The fact is, if the Kenyan who trained that AI, if they did not have that contract, would their input have existed? And the question I think every creative or any worker in this capitalist system should ask themselves, would this work exist without the direction of the person who has given me the prompt? So in this case, the Kenyans were prompted and they were told to train. And therefore, the person who owns the work that they created was their prompter, if we are going to use AI language. And that understanding is useful in also knowing where you are in the hierarchy. When you're talking about creatives and whether creatives use when they use these tools, whether they own it, if you go to one of the what's the one that makes music and it's on, yes, Suno. So Suno on free model will tell you that you don't own it. But if you pay premium, you own the work that it has created. So you have to really read the contracts, read the terms, and understand where it is that you are. But in the concept of copyright, for example, copyright is simple, it's an original work. So have you created an original work? Whether together with the AI or not, have you created an original work? Is it in a permanent form and has it been distributed? So if you think of it as in commerce terms, was there creation, was there production, was there distribution? And that's as simple as it gets. So if you look at that pathway, there has to be creation, it has to be original, it has to be in a permanent form, and it has to be distributed in a distributable form. And that originality must be there. So, but if I take your work and I put it into the system, and then say I've created a new work, the fruit of a poisonous tree does not create a new tree. But now this is now where the muddle of issues can come from, because people are stealing work. As we speak, there are artists whose work has been used to train AI, and their work is being pulled down when the AI versions of their work is the one that is commercialized on YouTube, for example. So it's a whole jungle, but like I said, you have to think of where the fruit came from. Those are the two questions I can answer.
So I'll try to also run through the things very fast. Again, I'd like to clarify my opinion on AI. I am very much a technologist, and I think if evolution passes you, you're left behind. So I'm all for technology. The main thing I was saying is I have trust issues with the people behind the technology, with what the technology is used for. And I spoke about like a currency turning into a commodity. So is this a tool? As a tool, it's great. Is it a tool, or is it a thing that's being used to control us and to play with us and to, like, what else could it be used to do with us in the future? I spoke about propaganda and all of that. I really like the question of consciousness. Yeah, there's a lot of, so for me, I'd also like to say that I feel like we are all learning from each other. So I can't give a definitive answer on what consciousness is, but I think that's the right question. What is consciousness? And I've been playing around how human beings think that we are the highest in, we're the most intelligent, we're the most conscious. What of trees? What of insects? But it's also interesting what you're saying of where AI might be in terms of consciousness. I'm not going to deny that. I don't have full facts, but I've read a lot about people who were at the forefront of AI, who have been ringing all alarm bells, talking about the power that this technology has gotten to and how we are very unaware of the possibility that it has and the dangers that it poses to society. And then the prompter or the owner of the AI model, for me, that's also like a very great question, and you answered it in a very great way. I had like a more simpler way to think about it. So I thought about it in the form of labor or intellectual, and it's back to the thing that I was saying about the person who presses a button on the camera versus the person who made the frame, the person who gave the direction, the person who had intention. I think that's what creating is. It's intentionality, it's consciousness, and that's, so that becomes a maker. So if a conscious AI makes a thing, then the AI is a maker. Yeah.
Okay. KKC also has a response to this question, so I just like to give her space.
Hi, thank you so much. I wanted to respond to the question on consciousness. Even as human beings, we don't have a settled definition of consciousness. It's one of the hardest problems of philosophy of mind, and we have been arguing about it for years. But what I'd like to push back on is the assumption that learning fast and processing data are markers of consciousness. For example, a virus can replicate faster than any human cell. We don't call it conscious. Speed and scale are not consciousness. A calculator can process numbers faster than any human, but we don't call it conscious. What AI does is pattern matching at an extraordinary scale. It has zero, well, maybe not zero, but it has no awareness of what it's doing. There's no sense of itself doing it, and there's no experience of the output that it produces. So it just generates text and images that sound like understanding because it was trained on text written by people who understand. And that's a very different thing completely. As of today, there's no evidence that there is consciousness in current AI. And we need to stop treating AI as conscious, because if we do that, we stop asking who is actually accountable for its decisions, when in reality, is the who makes its models and who owns the AI. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, KKC, for that intervention, because consciousness and intelligence are deep philosophical ideas, actually, if you really mind them out. I'll just give a dictionary definition to build on what she's saying, and then leave with a reference. Consciousness is a state or quality of being aware of one's own existence, surroundings, thoughts, and sensations. In essence, it is the subjective internal experience of what it is like to be a living entity, encompassing everything from perceiving colors to feeling emotions and making decisions. The concept is broken down into several key dimensions: sentience, awareness, self-awareness. And I think that it's interesting that we're talking about consciousness in relation to humans, and does it have our consciousness? But there are also people who, and I like what KKC was saying, is that we are anthropomorphizing in some ways AI, we're giving it human qualities, but we're also deifying it in many ways, because it also seems to have these almost godlike qualities of being omnipotent, of being all-knowing, of being all around us through the internet, right? But does that mean that it has consciousness? And I think someone who can also help with contextualizing this is John Lennox, and also the ideas around the Turing test. And what does it mean for, what are the capabilities around machines and machine learning and consciousness of these things, and whether we can distinguish between a human and whether we can distinguish between a machine. So I think John Lennox is an interesting mathematician and philosopher, and has some interesting ideas around that if you want to continue a conversation around consciousness, artificial intelligence, and intelligence. And with that, I'd like to just say thank you to our panelists for joining us tonight. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience. And thank you for saying yes. I'd also like to thank the organizers of this event, Creators Garage, British Council, the whole team at Creatives. Thank you also to Nairobi Street Kitchen for hosting this event. And thank you for coming and not only listening, but participating and contributing. We really appreciate it. As Joki said at the beginning, we will be having more unfold conversations. So just keep tracking social media on Creatives Garage page to see what is coming up. And yeah, let's keep having these conversations. Wandiri is a musician. She's the co-founder of the African Women's Orchestra. So check them out, find out what they're up to. Imaus is also continuing with his works around archiving and digitizing, creating creative databases. And he's also involved with Munyu. So go check them out as well. Munyu does a lot of exhibitions. So yeah, thank you so much for tonight. And thank you everybody who's been involved. Good night.